This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. We're thrilled today to be joined by one of our top three most listened to guests of all time. We're joined by Matt Wolf, who's a brilliant analyst. And Matt talks to us regularly about what's going on in the PE world, what's going on in sort of the M&A world, and a lot more. Matt, it's been a fascinating time in the market, some good, some bad, some ugly, and a lot more. Tell us about yourself and your background, and then let's talk about what you're watching currently.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So, quick background on myself. I spent nearly 20 years in the sort of M&A valuation space, working closely with sponsors, founder-owned companies, buy side, sell side, kind of throughout the transaction cycle. And over the last 6, 7 years, really stepped into a role as not only client server, but as an analyst, studying these macroeconomic and industry trends that sort of funnel M&A activity, influence executive decision makers, strategies and execution of those strategies. And yeah, it's been never a dull day, even before all of the recent uncertainty and volatility. And it's an absolute whipsaw of information, and just trying to keep in front of everything is basically a full-time job. And what I'm kind of watching, what I'm looking at is the forward-looking signals from decision makers, from business leaders on what what does the next 12 months look like. We've seen a lot of major banks and other houses have signaled a base case for recession in the next 12 months. Might look something like the prior issues with inventory, supply chains, everything grinding to a halt is a potential scenario that I'm kind of watching and interested in. We've seen a lot of companies pull back on spending for consulting, advisory services as they focus on securing enough supplies and inventory ahead of any potential tariffs, particularly as certainly consumer products companies and others are gearing up for making orders already for back to school, even holiday shopping for 2025. And what is this uncertainty going to do with there? And the thing very few people are talking about is M&A, right? Going into 2025, we had hoped that it would be a robust year for deal making as sponsors in sort of older vintage funds were looking to exit. Money was being raised to make new acquisitions. Strategic companies were signaling they were ready to get back in the deal market, and maybe even the IPO window would reopen. And certainly there's still been some of that, right? Some big deals announced, some big IPOs announced, but it's really been muted compared to where our expectations were even 3 months ago. And there's no real sign to suggest that that will improve until we're on the other end of sort of this economic cycle, on the other end of the sort of likely recession.
Yeah, no, and it seems like there's lots of there is a lot of chatter about the economy in general. The economy in general had its own issues prior to sort of engulfing in sort of a trade battle or trade war. And so you sort of have two big macro things going on, and obviously will also be quite connected as to what happens with this trade war with other countries and the tariffs and everything, and how much does that put a little bit of a twist and chill on global economics. And then second, and fascinatingly so, what goes on with just the economy in general? Do we head into recession? Does Powell lower rates? At what point do rates go back to really low rates like under COVID? And even if Powell can control short-term rates, he can't really control long-term rates, because that's really based on how many people are willing to buy U.S. treasuries. And we do face some challenges if we end up in an international trade war of people stepping back from buying U.S. treasuries too. So it does seem like, and unfortunately, a tremendous amount of uncertainty after the markets had a bump and deal activity had a bump after the certainty of a presidential election being done. It seems like a lot of the uncertainty has been unwound as we sort of go back and forth based on wherever the policy of the day is. But what a challenging time as an M&A person, a deal person, a business person, to try and figure out next steps. Matt,
And
what else are you hearing from your investor clients, from private equity funds and so forth?
yeah, it's just an interesting point that just as a corollary to just a few years ago, which feels like a long time ago, of, well, as we were emerging from the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about a soft landing. What does that look like? What has to go right for us to hit this soft landing in terms of just the right monetary, fiscal policy, other economic factors that will deliver us through the pandemic without a recession? And we largely achieved that. Going forward, what we're hearing is, and what they're talking about is, where's the soft landing? Like, there is no path for that soft landing, no real path that people can see or that is likely to occur. And so there's sort of, what I'm hearing and what we're looking at is, what is sort of the worst case scenario? There's so much uncertainty. How do we prepare for the worst? First of all, trying to figure out what that even looks like is difficult, right? What is a likely bad or worst case scenario? And then how do we prepare for that? So in terms of deploying money, making acquisitions, I mean, it's tough, right? Ultimately, a private equity sponsor makes money by deploying capital, but it's very difficult, and the hesitance to pull the trigger on deals has exploded over the past few weeks. Still, certainly quality assets exist, and there are reasons to be optimistic across sectors about making acquisitions and driving efficiency, particularly in the lower end of the middle market. But man, it's a lot more analysis has to go into these deals, and things are really being extra scrutinized, if they're even being looked at all.
Well, no, and your point is well taken. I mean, every deal did already come with a recession scenario where everybody looked at what happens in case of a recession. And now it seems though, in terms of deal discussions, those those discussions have become paramount as to what does this asset look like? What does this business look like in the case of a real or serious recession? And that really does cause either people to really want to price at a serious discount to take into that account, or just really, as you're saying, just hold off on deals until this clears out a little bit. But it is causing a lot of uncertainty, and we'll see how it plays out. Matt,
Yeah,
as always, I want to thank you for joining us on the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. One of the clearest thinking people out there, one of the most gifted straight shooters there is. And that's one of the reasons you're one of the most listened to people we have on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
thank you, Scott. Always a pleasure.